I'm making pizza dough today. This is part of a yeast bread family, in the yeast bread family. And when we talk about yeast breads, it's because the leavening in the product is using yeast. Most of the recipes that you find will say active dry yeast, and that means that these are little microorganisms, and they grow. And once they're packaged in this foil package, this is dry. Sometimes you can buy cake, and it comes in a foil package also. For bread machines, it's much finer. These are a little bit bigger granules. And the recipe talks about proofing the yeast, and that's making sure, what you're doing is making sure that the yeast is working, it's not too old. And I have a package here that expired on March of 2009, so it's a year old, and I thought it might be interesting to see if this one still will work. So to proof it, and according to the directions in the recipe that I have for my pizza, you always want to proof yeast. You're going to take a cup of very warm water. It should be water warm enough that you can, warm enough to your touch. You don't want to scald or burn yourself. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So I have a cup, and I'm going to open, I always cut these, it's a little bit easier to cut them to get them open. And I'm going to sprinkle this on top of the water. And the other thing I'm going to do is give it a pinch of sugar. It needs sugar to grow. It needs sugar to give it food, because what we want to happen is for the microorganisms to start reacting with the sugar and water and start producing carbon dioxide gases, and that's what makes your bread rise. And basically the ingredients for any kind of bread recipe is a liquid, it's yeast, it's some sugar so that the yeast can grow, so it can expand, and oil, some salt, and flour. The liquid in this recipe is going to be water. We're making a pizza crust, so we want it a little more chewy, not quite as tender as in dinner rolls would be. So you let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes and watch. Now, if it doesn't start bubbling up and producing gases, then we know that this yeast is too old, and so I'll start over and do another proofing. So we'll come back in about 5 minutes and see how this yeast is doing. And you can, I think you could see on the video how most of the yeast has settled to the bottom. So it is absorbing water. It is, you know, it is the little granules, and it's settling to the bottom. So we'll let it do its working and come back, and you know, if it is overflowing on top of the cup, we know that it's still good. But this is always a good thing to do with yeast. I've fed the rest of the sugar to the water and yeast, and I did give it a stir, and if you can see, there's bubbles on top, and it has separated there. You can see the difference in colors. So that means this yeast is working. It's active, it's still alive and well, and that's what we wanted to make sure, and that's called proofing. And this is something I always do, everything I ever make with yeast breads, unless it's a recipe that says you mix the flour and the yeast together. And that's not a very rare, and it doesn't happen very often. I am going to use my electric mixer to do the next step of mixing, and this is a dough hook that goes with the mixer. Smaller mixers, the hand mixers, do have the dough hooks. You can't use those smaller ones very long, because this gets very, very stiff, And this recipe that I'm using says to mix by hand, but I'm going to use my electric mixer. So the dough hook looks different. It's exactly what it says. It's a hook, and it beats that flour and the yeast, and it's part of that whole action of developing the gluten in the flour. So I'm going to put the rest of the liquid, which is the other warm water. I have that warm. Look at this guy go to town. Can you see that? It's really working now. And this was older yeast, so that's why I said if you proof it and make sure that it's still active, it's usable. So we're going to put that in. Now, yeast, I keep talking about it's a microorganism, and if the water is too hot, you'll kill that microorganism. So you need it warm enough, but not too hot. So depending on the heat from your tap water, your faucets, you can use those. I want to get all these microorganisms, all my yeast out. And when you smell bread baking, it's this yeast that you're smelling, and that's why it always smells so good. Okay, the next step is to add the flour. It says 1.5 to 2 cups of flour, plus the whole, and I'm using whole wheat. So it says you can use whole wheat or rye, and I'm choosing to use the whole wheat in this one. So the oil and salt don't go in yet, so I'm going to set that aside, and I'll put in, I am using bread flour. Bread flour has more gluten in it. It doesn't have any soft wheat in it, so there's more gluten. But the whole wheat flour doesn't have as much gluten, so it's a little bit of a mix. Okay, so I put in a cup and a half, and I'm going to stir this till it's nice and soupy. So use my electric mixer. Do a little stir first. And I want to scrape the edges of this. Make sure there's not any flour up along the edges. And if you have a recipe that calls for milk, it will tell you to heat the milk. Now you don't want to boil it, because if you had boiled milk then and put the yeast in with that, it would scald the milk, or kill the yeast action. So I wanted to show you this. I was concerned when I first started this recipe that maybe my yeast wasn't going to work, so I started another package, and if you can see this, it's come well over almost over the top. It's over and above the cup, so this one is really working, and the other one was working also. So this is what the yeast is supposed to be doing. I mixed this till it was bubbly and it's kind of soupy, and it is bubbling here. So we're going to let this rest for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to stir in the salt, the oil, and more flour. But this step has to be done by hand. I'm not going to do this with the electric mixer. Well, I've let this sit for about 10 minutes, and it is very bubbly, and I don't think you can see it very well, but I'm going to add the olive oil to this now, and the salt, and stir that part in. Then I'm going to add the flour cup by cup till this forms a sticky dough. Because right now it's very soupy and it's not anything that you could work up into a dough. So I'm adding regular bread flour. So there's a cup. And you just don't add it all at once, just stir that in. And it's starting to get a little bit thicker. Now, something on your recipe, the recipe I'm using says to always stir in the same direction. Don't stir one direction and then turn it, because you're trying to develop these gluten fibers, and by stirring in the same direction, you're developing those. They won't tear, they won't be shortened, which is what you want to do. So always go in the same direction. So that's 1 cup. Here's 2. Don't think I'm going to add the whole thing. And you want to just stir, because if you add too much, then it gets too stiff and you won't be able to go backwards on it. You can't take it out. You can always add more, but you can't take it out. It definitely needs more. So I'll add this. And there, it's starting to get a nice stiff dough. I'll probably add just a little more and then turn it out onto a floured surface to knead. There's not an exact measurement for these. Okay, before we go any farther, I want to get my bowl ready, and I always use wax paper. It takes a sheet about this size. You're going to fold it over your hand like this. Fold one under your thumb, the other side under your thumb, and you have a nice little covering for your fingers, so when you dip into the shortening, you don't get them all over your fingers, and you can move this around pretty easily in your bowl. But whenever you're doing yeast breads, you have to grease a bowl. This keeps the crust from getting, or the outside of the yeast ball dough from getting a hard crust. So that's the first thing you have to do, is get your bowl ready. And sometimes you will just use the same bowl that you mixed in. Like I could use this bowl again, but I'd have to wash it, grease it, and then put the dough back in after I knead it. But I'm going to be making some more things today, so I need this bowl, and I'm not going to be able to put my dough back in there. What I need to do right now is get a floured surface. And I'm going to turn this out onto the floured surface. This is a little bit, it's still pretty doughy. It's very stiff. I'm not able to stir it anymore, so I'm going to start kneading more flour in. And we'll get it out here. It's a pretty heavy dough. I want to get as much off the sides as I can. Make sure you take off any rings, any bracelets, jewelry like that, because if you get this dough in all those little pieces, it'll take something to get it out. Okay, so I need flour on top, flour in between, because it's pretty sticky. It's going to stick to me. So the kneading process is to fold it towards you in half, push away with the heel of your hand. Fold and push, fold and push, fold and push. And this is a pretty soft dough. Every dough is a little bit different. And it's taking up quite a bit of flour here. And see, I'm getting flour on my heel of my hand. But thing is, you don't want to get too much on it right away. And I use two hands when I do this because it takes some definite strength to do some of this kneading. And we're going to do this for about 6 to 8 minutes. So it's a matter of really working and getting that protein gluten nice and developed. So you have a nice sized pizza dough. It won't be flat. So we'll just keep working this. And I'll come back to you in just a little bit when it's pretty close to being done. I've kneaded this for about 6 to 8 minutes, and the whole time it's been taking up the flour. And you knead it until it's soft and pliant, and it says earlobe soft. And it's worked up quite well. It's still a little bit sticky, a little tacky, but that's okay. At least it's not too stiff that it's going, I mean, it's workable, which is what you want. So you're going to put it in the bowl, turn it around so you get all of it greased. And then this one, at this point, can either go into the refrigerator, cover it with saran wrap overnight, and we'll come back and make pizza dough out of it, or we'll let this cover it and sit and rise. So I'm going to take a damp cloth, I'm going to dampen a cloth and cover it, and I'm going to put it into my oven because I want it out of cold drafts. I don't want it in any drafts. Yeast like nice warm places to grow, and so it should double in size. It's time to check the pizza dough, and you can see it's nice and it rose a lot, and if I put a finger in it, it stays indented, which means that it's been proofed, and not proofed, but it has risen enough. And on the surface you can see like little air pockets, little air bubbles, which means that the yeast has risen and it's worked, and the flour is very elastic. So the next thing to do is take a fist, and this is the fun part. You get to punch it, and if you heard it, it went. And this is a very, very nice dough. Doesn't have too much flour in, although it's could probably stand a little bit more. It's a little sticky, so I want to get some flour on my hands. That might make it just a little easier to handle. This pizza dough recipe, you can make basically three pizzas out of it. So what I want to do is divide it into 3, and you're going to just kind of let gravity do its work. You don't want it to tear, but it's very pliable. Sometimes you get pizza dough recipes that are really, really stiff, but this one's nice and pliable. So it'll do some stretching, which is what we want it to do. You know, you see them doing the throwing them around. I've never ever tried that. And I probably would wear it before it went anyplace else. So, and I'm going to use, this is a silicone pizza pan. And you don't have to grease this. So I can just take and stretch it out a little. And if your dough kind of springs back, then let it rest. I don't want to tear and make holes, so you need to be a little careful. stretch it out, and there I'm making a hole, so I don't want to do that. Depends on how thick you like your pizza crust. You can roll them out real thin, and they can be thin and crunchy, or you can have them thicker and chewier. However, it's kind of your preference. So I'm not sure I want it to get much bigger than this. I'm having a problem there. It's too thin. See if I can move some dough over here. And then you'll put your favorite toppings on. Put pizza sauce on. Bake it. And then pull it out and put the cheese on afterwards. And then put it back in for a little bit more to melt the cheese. But there's the pizza crust. And so you can put your favorite toppings on. I have another one of these. So if you want a thicker crust, you would use more dough. It depends on what you want. Let's see if I can get this to stretch out a little bit more. Or you can take a rolling pin and roll. That's another option. This pan happens to have holes in it, so I don't want to press it down too much because the dough will press through the holes. So we'll kind of let it sit there and relax a little and see if we can move it a little bit more. So this is all you do for pizza crust, and you can let this rise a little bit, and the dough will rise. It depends if you like a thicker crust or thinner crust. So if you like a thicker crust, let it rise for maybe 30 minutes, and it'll have be nice and thick and nice and chewy. Or you can take a rolling pin and roll it out real thin. And you notice I didn't roll it on the countertop, because then you get more flour in it. This pizza recipe made 3 pizzas, and I put one of them on a stone, another one on a silicone plate or silicone baking round. No cheese on top yet. About halfway through the baking, I'll pull them out and put the mozzarella on top of it. This is a very hot oven, 475 degrees, and it should bake for probably, I would say, about 20 minutes. So somewhere around 8 to 10 minutes, then I will pull these out and put the cheese on top. But I have onions and ground beef and mushrooms and pepperoni, and then I'll put mozzarella cheese on top of that. So this is the first step of the baking process. I've taken the pizzas out. I added the cheese about halfway through, so these baked somewhere around 20 minutes. Maybe not quite, but the cheese is melted and bubbly. The crust on the outside is golden brown. So they are ready to eat. The silicone, I cannot cut the pizza itself on the silicone. I'll have to transfer that to a cutting board or something. But anyway, this makes a nice sized, quite a few pizzas for that one recipe. So looks like a nice recipe. Enjoy.